Good evening. Welcome to what is billed to be a very interesting discussion, and I'll tell you why. It's because we're here at the United Nations complex in Gigiri, Nairobi, and we are with the mayors, managers of urban areas from all over the world. They're gathered here for the UN Habitat Governing Council meeting that is going on in Nairobi. And we thought, let's bring people together in the room and start learning from each other. What can urban areas in the world learn from each other? Cities are changing. People are changing in terms of their relationship to each other and to the cities in which they live. The language now is no longer that of rural-urban migration. It is that of making people enjoy the lives that they live in cities and ensure that they actually get economic benefits from them. So we thought, let's bring people together who actually do manage cities and hear and learn from them. And we hope that this discussion will actually be a very enlightening one. And I'll tell you why, because I want to begin with Dr. John Kloss. You're head of UN Habitat here in Nairobi, but you've managed a world-famous city and you've managed it extremely well.
Thank you.
What sort of lessons do you think these two experiences are able to give you?
Well, I think that the issue of urbanization and the rapid growth of it, it's now in front of us because the figures are astonishing. More than 50% of the world population is already living in cities. And it's been said that the predictions say that in 20 to 30 years, another 25% of the world population will be living in cities. And this will change, the international scenario in the sense that urbanization is requiring a lot of investment, a lot of changes in governance systems, enforcement of local authorities, and these kind of things. Then we are beginning a kind of urban era in human history that it's very relevant.
Esther, yours is an interesting story. We were laughing just now about the fact that you said you're from a village that's very close to Nairobi, but yet you only saw the city of Nairobi for the first time when you came to university. So I think you're the perfect person to ask the relationship between a rural area and an urban area. Do you feel that that relationship is as it should be?
Thank you very much. And yes, I'm Esther Moramwiru. I'm from Kenya. And I grew up in Limuru, in a village called Rironi. And until when I got a scholarship to come to the University of Nairobi, that's the only time I came to Nairobi. And I think what is happening is that traditionally the cities are not places that are welcoming to young people. And I think what we feel, particularly as people who are in the pre-urban areas, it feels that things have to change. And I think we have seen tremendous change since I would say for me, since 1996, especially with the coming of the Habitat 2 conference, when there was this creation of a partnership among all the actors in the cities. And cities have been thinking differently. We have not seen enough of creating space for young people, particularly coming from poor backgrounds. Because besides myself coming from a poor background and coming to the city at a very young age, I also work with young people. I do gender work, but I also work with young women and young men from Madara slums and Korogocho slums, and I know that they are suffering. They are in the city, but
we'll come to that question because it's actually a very important one, how young people relate to the cities in which they live. And Mayor Masunda, it's a bit unfair to ask you about young people and you have white hair on your head, but I think it's a crucial question because what Esther raises about young people coming to the cities, in most of our African cities, Asian cities, Latin American cities, when that move happens, they typically come and settle into informal settlements, what we might call slums, before they find their way into the urban life and the economic life of that city. How do you manage that as the mayor of Harare, for instance?
I think one thing that struck me within a very short space of time after getting into the hot seat, as from the 1st of July 2008, was the need to have an inclusive city, a livable city, a city that is going to cater for a divergence of interests, ranging from the young, the women, the vulnerable, the widowed, the wealthy, and so forth. And that reflects itself in the 28 housing estates that fall under the jurisdiction of the city of Harare. They range from the most densely populated, which is Mbare, to the most plush, which is Borode Brook. So we have a range in the 28 housing estates that we manage of the poor to those that have got money coming out of their ears. So as a city, it's important for us to strike a balance, in terms of meeting the needs and expectations of all those people that gravitate towards the city in search of not only the bright lights, but in search of their fortunes.
All right, Anna, yours is perhaps a bit of a different challenge. What's happening now is a lot of cities are starting to become attractive to people from all over the world. So your skilled people think, I do not want to live in Oslo anymore, I want to live in Shanghai, I want to live in New York, I want to live perhaps even in Nairobi. Now, how do you attract your citizens to stay on in the cities in which you manage? And how do you ensure that the people who are looking for opportunity, as the mayor says, the bright lights and the big cities, are actually attracted to your cities and can be able to establish themselves economically?
Well, we are facing some severe challenges. You've been mentioning urbanization. Another severe challenge that we face all over the world is the growing young population. Within a few years, more than 60% of the global population will be under 18 years of age. Now, I think that the key to in order to avoid that this generation is a lost generation, to make sure that that the cities provide economic opportunities and that we create livable cities where they want to create their identity, to raise their families, we need to include them. I was just yesterday told about a fascinating example here from Kenya. CC Niamani, which is an SMS-based platform that was created by young people just before the elections here in Kenya, where the young voices were able to communicate their desires for community development and to spread the word. Now, I think that as city managers, as mayors, as politicians, it is our duty to make sure that these voices, the young voices, are heard and included. We need to construct cities that take into account what the young generation needs and wants for the future. And that needs to be done now. So we need to create arenas where these voices can be actually heard.
Isn't it easier, Mr. Mayor, you are a city manager. But isn't it easier to manage a city for old people? Old people don't have too many demands. Young people will demand schools for their children. They will demand discos to go on Saturday nights. They'll demand churches. They'll demand roads that can accommodate their fast cars. Old people just want to sit there and live the good life. But young people have too many demands.
I think the older people have their own special needs. And especially in a country like ours, where most of the support structures were devastated during the politically induced socio-economic meltdown. So unlike in the past, where the older people would have a fallback position in terms of the pensions that and nest eggs that are built up over the years, I find myself in an invidious position as mayor in doing more than just what is expected normally of a mayor. We have the Harare Mayor's Chair Fund, which has been in existence for the last 60 years. And the Mayor's Chair Fund was established specifically to cater for the needs of the vulnerable members of the community only at Christmas time. That was why it was called Christmas Chair Fund. But in the last 58 months that I've been in office, I find that we are now catering for the needs of a total of 86 charitable organizations, which include the elderly. And that fund is headed by my wife and 12 volunteers. And we have a tall order in terms of mobilizing financial and material resources to support, not only the elderly, but the orphanages and other members of the community who are not capable of taking care of themselves.
There's something you say that strikes me, and perhaps you, Esther, would want to answer it, where the mayor speaks about engaging with charities, engaging with non-governmental actors, and you are part of those non-governmental actors. there's some level of complaint that you're not elected, so therefore how would you speak on behalf of young people? But young people need to have a voice, and they don't necessarily have the strongest voices when it comes to city management.
I think increasingly young people, and particularly the role that the civil society has played, at least in my country, I know, they have understood very well you don't have to be in a position of power to be able to influence the decisions that are made there. And an organization like Roots Kenya, all we do on a day-to-day basis is sharpening and enhancing the capacity of the people in this city to be able to make demands and make sure that the city of Nairobi, to be able to make sure that the national government is responsive to the needs of the people. But you know, it is good to us to really demand. It is also important for young people to know they have a responsibility. And
you know, it's so easy for you to say that, but in practical terms, when you speak about Nairobi, for instance, and young people say we want a voice, the voice they are demanding is a voice that they can go up to the mayor and say, this is what I want. But what the mayor is concerned with is that the city looks good. So if the young man is out selling samosas on the streets, he's going to get chased by the mayor's people. Now, how do you get that voice in?
Well, I think if you engage communities and the residents of the city to be part of the planning, they will be able to do the business and do the business in the right place. I think it calls the mayors, the managers of the city to open the space for dialogue and for participatory planning, because what the people are saying, we do not want to sell madazis, we do not want to sell our warehouses where things are not defined. What we want to have is a planned city which has appreciated that we must make life out of this city, that we are here to stay. We are not going to, Dr. Klaus has just said that we are urbanizing. And I think in this country, we have seen the mega growth of this city. It is beyond what we could have expected 10 years ago. But we must make sure that this city is possible for people to live across social and gender and political class. And I think advocacy is one of the things that will sharpen people's...
Dr. Klaus, you heard me saying samosas and you smiled.
Yeah, no, I think that in a more structural way, we need to enforce and we need to strengthen local governments. You know, there's something that perhaps the Scandinavians, they have a very good history, because even in Scandinavia, their countries the country was formed from the local authorities. Mm-hmm. And one way to guarantee and facilitate the participation of the people is that the government approaches the people. Yes. And one way that the government approaches the people is just empowering the local governments. And in that sense, the move of the Kenyan constitution to establish the county administration, and now we are looking very, in a very hopeful manner how this evolves. Because now these counties, they are going to be empowered. They are going to have a role in the political scenario of Kenya. And that for the urbanization and for, approaching the politics and the policies to the people, it's going to be a big opportunity. And even the youth and gender, women should, enter in this level of power in a very convinced way. I think that the experience of the Scandinavian countries in that sense is extraordinary. Even in the Scandinavian some countries, the local government is the one who collects the taxes. They keep the taxes for themselves that they need, and a little bit of them, it goes to the central government. When usually it's the other way around, isn't it?
Yes, I'm glad you raised that, because I don't know, everyone is saying Scandinavia is the way to go, but how easy is it to establish that method of working? How easy is it to make the cities the locus of national life?
Well, I think, let me start by saying that we mustn't sit up here and sound as if the voice of the youth or other marginal group is a challenge. It's a resource. You know, we need the young, we need this voice. We need the resources of the young people to create this new brave world. And that is why it's our duty, and it's so important to create these arenas. I think maybe we need a slight change of mindsets. I don't think it's easy. And I think it's a little bit of a culture as well.
The reason why that happens is because the more voices you have making demands, as Esther is saying, and you have a mayor sitting there, he's thinking these are more constituencies to please. And that's a very difficult thing.
But now we're saying they're making demands. But they are raising their voice to appeal, to find ways of using their resources, you know, to make a better world for their children again. And you know, we don't have a lot of time with the rapid urbanization we see now. Planning takes time. Mr. Kloss, I'm sure, can talk a lot about that. I've never been a mayor, but planning is a time-consuming matter. You know, we have to start now to produce or to create cities that are livable and that creates equity, that are sustainable environmentally and socially. So we need these voices and these ideas raised from the young generation because they know what they need for the future. And those plans need to be developed now. So we need each other. It's not a demand. It's a reasonable. It's a very reasonable request.
I will ask two questions, and you're free to jump in with your contribution, Mr. Mayor, but I want you to throw this in as you respond. The cities in which we live in, especially in Africa of all places, and Zimbabwe and Kenya specifically, were designed with apartheid in mind, which is why you find Harare, for instance, or Nairobi, they call the center of the city what we call the CBD, the Central Business District. Is very organized. The streets are clean, they're wide, they're lit up. But you go into the periphery, what used to be the African areas, they're what the disorganization comes from. Now, you're managing a city that's a living organism. How do you make sure that that is no longer the legacy you carry forward with you?
Well, in Harare, we have the good fortune of having had a very solid base from a planning perspective. So we've picked up that ball from there and we're running with it. We have a fully fledged urban planning services department and a fully fledged housing and community services department, amongst other 8 or 10 major departments that are seized with particular responsibilities. But I like the point that Anna raises of making sure that we have sustainable cities. That is the key thing, and all that is predicated upon planning, because without planning, you know, you're not going to get anywhere. And I think the most important thing that needs to happen, especially in cities in developing countries, is to depoliticize service delivery issues. And that's why I'm so fascinated about the model that is being put in place in Nairobi to have a governor who is going to be responsible for not only Nairobi, but Greater Nairobi, if you like, you know, which is, I believe, is now going to be a metropolitan county. But more than that, what needs to happen more of, especially in cities, is the need for the city to be self-sustaining. I mean, in Harare, for instance, we don't get any funding from central government. And that's been the case even before independence. So it's not a post-independence phenomenon. You know, we have a $600 million revenue and capital expenditure budget, and we have to fund it, you know, from our own operations. Because in most cases, especially in the case of capital cities, you know, the capital cities should be treated as a business enterprise, because Harare is responsible for over 40% of the country's GDP. And I'm sure that's the case as well in Nairobi.
There's something, again, and it's all sort of feeding into each other. And I want to bring in Dr. Kloss, because not only are you now the head of UN Habitat, but you were involved in more or less the rebirth of Barcelona in Spain. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, if you sit there and speak to the mayor of Harare, what he will say, the lesson that he takes from it, is that you should have an Olympics. You should build for a World Cup. You should bid for an Africa Cup of Nations, which then means a lot of attention paid to your city. There's going to be a lot of money coming in, and that will be your impetus to change that city. Is that always a lesson to learn?
Well, it depends. In each case, is different. You know, in the case of Barcelona, for example, we thought in the Olympic Games, because we had a huge crisis. We had something that for us it was very, unexpected. After the first crisis of the oil prices in '73, our industry, in a very short period of time, it became obsolete. It became too expensive. And we lost a lot of jobs from the industry. And then we had a lot of unemployed people. And then we were looking, what are we going to do? You know, we have the city here, we have the people here, and there's no jobs. And of course, we needed investment. And then it occurred to us to say, okay, let's organize here a big thing. And in fact, Olympic Games, was one of the alternatives, because we were thinking, well, let's think in a world fair, Olympic Games. Barcelona was a very industrial city. It was not very keen in in sports. Sport was,
Barcelona, with the football team.
Yeah, but then suddenly, when we beat and we won the bid for the Olympic Games, everybody understood that this was a mechanism of changing the city. The important thing for us, it was not just the feast of the Olympic Games. The important thing is to manage all the process in order to do in the city all the things needed to change the nature of the city. And we move from an industrial city to a post-industrial city.
But Dr.
With
Kloss,
culture, tourism,
but the
and
question
all that.
is this, and that's what I was getting to, is your example is a good one. And there's some cities that have managed to do that process. I think the last time it happened was in South Africa with the Football World Cup 3 years ago. The problem is that if a governor of a county in Kenya is watching this program, they'll say, that's what I need to do. I need to do a big project to transform my county, to transform my urban areas.
Yeah.
And that might end up having disinvestment or investment in the wrong things.
Yes, well, but I think that you need to think that investment is coming if there's some kind of guarantees that the investment will produce its return. Because nobody gives money for nothing. Everybody gives money expecting a return of this money. And then you need to build up a platform which is not just physical, it's also juridical, it's legislative, yes, in order to guarantee that the investment is going to have its return. And this is very important. In order to be at the level of investment, you need to guarantee a minimum set of conditions, and urban planning is one, the first probably. You need to begin with urban planning, as the mayor has said, because without urban planning, you don't have enough public space. We have done satellite photos of all the cities, most of the cities of the world, and we are measuring how much of each city it's allocating to the streets and communication patterns. In a planned city, usually this is 30% of the land. In an unplanned city, usually it's 8, 9, 10%. This is a huge difference. There's a huge need of urban planning, because if you don't have urban planning and you don't have a street, you cannot move in the city, and the productivity of the city is not of interest to the investment, to the private investment.
Here then brings you in, Esther, with your inclusion of young people, with you said I can't use the word demands, but this inclusion sometimes means for city managers, mayors and the likes, they say these young people don't pay that much in taxes. They don't pay that much because they don't own land, they won't pay land rates, they don't earn that much, they don't pay much in income tax. And so the question of resources that Dr. Kloss is speaking about, you're asking to be included, but you're not paying for that inclusion.
Well, I think we must make a deeper analysis of what contribution means. Contribution is not just about money. I want to give you asked, what do we do with these cities that are already cluttered?
Yes.
Nairobi being one of them, Mathare, Kibera. I have worked in Mathare for the last 15 years. And I do know that for many years, the city of Nairobi was unable to get garbage out of Mathare. Who was able to organize communities to get garbage out of Mathare? And later, in all the other estates, is the young people. So they did have a plan. They may not have come with the money, but they did have the knowledge. I want to tell you, when I started doing this work in human settlement, and I was working in Mathare, all the city council toilets had gone to disuse, and they were being used, the spaces where women used to be raped. The women, through what we do, local to local dialogue, engaged the city mayor, engaged with the political leaders, and they said, We only want you to give us the opportunity to demonstrate how to make our city safer. And they cleaned those toilets with the well-wishers from diplomatic communities. Women of the diplomats, wives of the diplomats would come and give Groots Kenya a couple of dollars. And with that, the women were able to rehabilitate most of the toilets in Mathare. And it became a case study. Now, today, we, of course, see new young people, like the young man who is helping to construct toilets there. And I think this is what we need to account for. That the young people, they do have a mindset. They want to contribute. But I think the way we are counting their contribution is so traditional. It's not just about money. They have knowledge, they have expertise, and this is what they want. They want to bring on board. Young women, they have lived experiences. We want to give them an opportunity to share their experiences and tell us how is it to live in these cities so that it can inform the managers. And I think this is the role the civil society, I think, has played very, very well, ensuring that there is a space to share our stories, ensuring that we can unleash our potential that may be not quantified in the traditional way.
But here is my worry, and Mayor Masunda, my worry is about you now. Because what happens with Esther's initiatives and the people that she interacts with, the young people who go and say the city council of Nairobi, the city council of Harare has led this toilet to be in disuse, has not collected garbage here in 2 or 3 years. We shall do it ourselves. That then absolves you of your responsibility. And what happens is that you're absolved of the responsibility, that's number one. Number two, you pay more attention to the big businesses, back to the tax issue, that pay the money that you can meet on the golf course, because a young person, you'll only meet him outside your window as you're driving past.
Yeah, in fact, it doesn't absolve me from the responsibility at all. If anything, it enhances my involvement, because we have, through the Junior Council concept, in fact, the Junior Council is celebrating its 60th anniversary. So it encompasses lower sixth form students drawn from 66 schools. So that's a mirror image of the Senior Council. So we get these young Turks to be imbued with that sense of civic duty, and they become aware of the need for them to play their part along the lines that Esther mentioned. So when they grow up, they realize that there's a civic responsibility when it comes to running cities, one. And two, they also get an opportunity to undergo some career guidance counseling because of the various departments, the engineering services, town clerk department, city treasurer, and so forth. And we have a system there which is funded by some corporates, a vocational scholarship scheme. So we get these bright sparks, from high schools. They come and be sponsored by the city, which then sees them through universities, and they come back and serve the city for the equivalent number of years during which they would have been sponsored at university. Right. And so it's one way of actually attracting talented young people to come and work in the city.
Dr. Los, you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, it's just in relation to what has been said, it's quite clear that the society and the grassroots and the people, it's ready to cooperate and work, because people want the improvement, and if you ask them and you offer them an alternative, they will come. Here, though, we need to find out a strategy to break this thing that you had mentioned, that in many parts of Africa, you have the business district, which is planned, and then suddenly the plan disappears.
Yes.
And we have a specific proposal for that. And we say that the first strategy should be to plan a city extension. To take a piece of land as near possible, and if possible, connected to the business district, and do a big exercise of planned city extension. This is a specific program that we propose, and in fact, we have already 35 cities in the world that they are coming to us, and we are working together, because it's what you are saying. If the business district, which is planned, the plan is very small, let's enlarge this planning and make it accessible to other people. The problem is that, of course, some mayors and some governors around Africa, they come to me and they tell, yesterday even in public. One of them told us, you know, I have such a big and such a number of issues that I don't know where to start. And I always answer, please, if you don't know where to start, let's start by a planned city extension connected with the core of the city, in order that the water company, the electric utility, enlarges its services to the new planned area, and then we begin to feel the economies of urbanization. Because the economies of urbanization come up after the well-designed compactness, which distributes the cost of the services to many people. And then the bills are lower. Because if you do flat urbanization in miles and miles and miles, there's no way to provide services because the cost, it jumps to the stars.
Just 1 second, Mr. Mayor. I want to bring in Anne into this discussion. And the way to solve all these problems, if you ask me, is what used to be done 30 years ago. Let's keep everyone in the rural areas, discourage them from coming into cities. I remember there was that whole discussion in the 1980s about rural-urban migration. And the key issue there was, don't have rural-urban migration. Let people stay on the farms, let people stay in the villages, let the cities be for the cities. And when you reach the age of the white hair, go back to the village. Simple solution.
Right. I don't think the strategy would be to stop the urbanization, but I do think there's one aspect that we haven't discussed here, and that not everyone needs necessarily to move to the biggest city. We also need strategies for the smaller and the middle-sized cities. And we must remember that, you know, even in the future, we will need someone to grow our food. We will need someone to take up the natural resources. You know, we need each other. And let's not forget that strategies for middle-sized cities is also very, very important to ensure regional balance nationally and globally. You know, we do need a regional balance. We do need to develop regionalization strategies between the surrounding areas outside the cities as well, because the different areas need each other. For the national economies, not least, this is important to ensure that we use both natural resources and human resources as good as possible.
Because, Mayor Masundi, you wanted to jump in, but as you answer the question, again, I'm throwing another one right at you. And it's that question of, when you have a city that's so big that it almost swallows the country. You speak about Harare being 40% of Zimbabwe's GDP. If you put maybe Harare and Bulawayo, that's the whole of Zimbabwe. If you look at Kenya, Nairobi is, I think, in excess of 60%. Now, if you take Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, and Eldoret, that's a whole country done, and probably one other urban area. And that's dangerous, because Nairobi, for example, sits very near the Rift Valley. If there's an earthquake, that's it. If anything happened to Harare, Zimbabwe no longer exists.
Yeah, I think that's why it's very important to have in the plan, the overall plan, a devolution process.
What Anne is talking about.
Along the lines that she's talking about. I mean, to give you an example, in Zimbabwe, we grow a lot of sugar in the Lawveld, which is about 500 kilometers from Harare. And there's been a deliberate policy on the part of the companies and individuals who are involved in the growing of sugar to make sure that there are sustainable towns that are developed in the immediate vicinity of where the sugar is grown. We're now seeing a migration of skilled individuals from Harare going to manage those sugar estates.
But isn't that your tax base, your skills base leaving you? You're not going to be very happy about that, will you?
No. I mean, it's all right, in a way it is, but the bulk of the people that actually do the growing of sugar are outside Harare. So they will still retain maybe a head office in Harare. So we still benefit, from the property tax, which is our principal source of revenue. But I also wanted to touch on a point that Dr. John Klaus raised earlier about the importance of planning, especially when you have the good opportunity or good fortune of hosting a major sporting event. In 1995, we hosted the All Africa Games. And one of the satellite urban settlements to Harare, which is about 30 kilometers away, and it's got a population of over 1.5 million, Chitungwiza, was given an opportunity of having a state-of-the-art aquatic complex, Olympic size, the works. That was the wrong place for that aquatic complex to be, but it was driven more by emotion on the part of the minister that was responsible for sport at the time, because that happened to be his constituency.
Chitungwiza was his constituency.
Yes, and immediately after the games, the aquatic complex became the proverbial white elephant. And today, that facility is being used for all sorts of things that are not remotely connected with any aquatic discipline. So that's a wasted investment, which, again, is a graphic illustration of the point that Dr. Kloss was at pains to make about the way, the facilities and infrastructure were developed in Barcelona to be in sync with the future of the city.
Because how easy is it, Dr. Kloss, and I'm sorry to bring you back to the Olympics and all that, because that complaint has been had in so many different occasions. In the Olympics, I think it was Montreal that had that similar problem. They still, I think, only managed to finish paying their debt a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Also, other cities, people have said, if you do this big event, if you host even the UN Habitat Governing Council as Nairobi, that's if you have gone broke.
Yes.
And Evans no longer have money. How do you deal with that problem?
We as I said, we had a very big crisis then, and we were very tough with the Olympic Committee. And we said to the Olympic Committee, listen, we want the chairman of the local Olympic Committee be the mayor. And we have been, I think, the only Olympic Committee that I remember that it has been chaired by the mayor.
Yes.
And then all the team of the mayor, I was then deputy mayor, all the team of the mayor, we were in the core of the design. Then we were designing the thing, of course, to serve the Olympics, but the underlying strategy, it was not the Olympics, it was the future of the city.
Mm-hmm. Which, this conversation and something of what Anne was saying about developing the smaller areas, wouldn't then have made sense to establish a university in Nairobi? So you'd never have had to come to Nairobi.
Well, let me tell you, I'm one of the proudest Kenyan. When in the last 10 years, I really consider this the country of the world. If you look at what you're calling education, it's fully decentralized. There is a university virtually everywhere. And I think, yes, we should have this, but it comes with time. And I think, other than really talking about what we didn't do, what I feel that we do have a strong opportunity as a Kenyan, as the city of Nairobi, and as many cities in this country, especially when we talk about devolution. The 47 counties, they have absolutely opportunity to develop everything they want in their own counties. But I think what we are being told here and what we are learning here is that it doesn't just happen. It needs to be planned. What Nairobi is doing, and you think about the ICT city, you think about the diplomatic city, think about what is being developed around Nairobi and the thinking of a metropolitan city.
And those white elephants?
I don't think so. I think as Kenyan, we have come to a point that we really have been able to come to a conference like this, hear what has worked elsewhere. We have visited those countries. I think Kenyans are good travelers, and I think we do observe. And I can tell you some of the things are being seen, being put in place. It's what we have learned. Just to have a mayor who is coming from the private sector, I personally think that's a good gift for this country. Because what is going to happen, he's not coming with a political baggage, and I hope he's not. I hope he's watching, and that we don't expect him to come with a political baggage. We expect him to come as a manager of the city that is going to have new ideas and give opportunity. I'm participating in a project that the UN Habitat is constructing over 2,000 units, low-income houses, just here in Mavoko.
But why?
Let me just say this. Let me just say this. And I think just being able to move the people who are sitting in low income, in no housing shanties, to come to a place where it's where me and you would want to go and stay, where we have to pay 50,000 to stay. But the UN Habitat, the Ministry of Housing, the government of Finland, they are providing an opportunity to show us the examples of how we can go out of the cluttered city and develop satellite places where people can actually
There's something I want to bring in because that actually sounds fairly familiar. I'll do that in just a second. We have, obviously, quite a number of people in the room. We've been seeing them as we've been going along, and I know they have a number of questions to ask, and so we have microphones all over, and you have the opportunity to just grab one, and you'll ask. And as you do that, as you grab a microphone, whoever is ready to ask a question, if what Esther is saying is true about establishing satellite cities, building the sort of places where you'd want to live, it has been tried before. We have had these showcase areas done. In Nairobi, it used to be a place called Buruburu, which was built in the 1970s, and it was said that it was the best in the Commonwealth. However, Buruburu has gone to this, has gone rather to seed. People have gone off, and the planning has gone to seed. Isn't it easier, isn't it better to develop what we currently have and keep on going and establishing 20,000 new housing units, a new satellite city, a new diplomatic city? Let's just sort out what we have now.
Well, you know, in my country, Norway, we have a strategy that says that people should be allowed to live anywhere they want. Now, that's quite an ambitious strategy. There are certain prerequisites to make that happen. One needs to ensure that social services, education, and the plans for that is available throughout. I think it's possible.
Buruburu went wrong. Kwanza City will then go wrong. The other city that's being established on a private basis will also go wrong. You can do as many examples as you want. And maybe it's unfair to ask you. I'll probably ask you, Dr. Kloss. You're the one who wants to go off and establish these showcase places and say, that's what I think. Look, in 30 years, it'll all have gone down.
Well, okay, yes. This is a common feature of some kind of initiative, which they are not big enough to be transformative, and they are not mixed enough in order to be a real street life and normal city. If you plan, for example, just housing for the poor, 6,000, then a kilometer away, a factory, then a commercial center 3 kilometers. This doesn't work, you know. You need to have the city on the mind, and you need to put the mixed use of the city. You know, you cannot specialize the city. I don't like when the city has an adjective. When the city is the city of technology, or the city of the, you know, whatever, the diplomat, the city of,
a city should be everything?
The city it's a mix. This mestiçage, I don't know if in English exists this word, no? It's just a mixture of things, you know. You shouldn't never specialize the city, because you know the best definition that I know of a city. It says a city is a place where you find what you are not looking for.
Like a good bookshop.
But not least to say that such a city, a specialized city, will never be sustainable, nor environmentally, nor socially. And I very much believe in designing cities that create equity and social equality. And that can be designed, you know, where you mix people, you mix groups, you create places where people meet. Huh? That's sustainability.
I'm getting a bit disturbed. And the reason I'm getting disturbed is that you all seem to be recommending to the planners in this room, recommending to the planners who are watching, forget Harare, forget Nairobi, forget Barcelona, go off and do what's called a greenfield site.
No, but exactly that's what I'm saying. I am a proud Nairobian, because we have realized we need ICT. We don't have, Buruburu is occupied. Other places are occupied, but we need something that attaches to the city. It's part of Nairobi. And I think if you do proper infrastructure, I'm not a planner, but I do believe that any things that are driving the city in the 21st century for cities that are existing, they have to be inbuilt. We don't have the privilege to go and start a new city in Kajiado, for example, with everything. We do have to ensure that the people from Nairobi are able to access everything that they need to live better in this city.
The mayor of the no longer to exist Harare, because your city now is being recommended to not be there. How do you handle that?
Right. I was just going to give you an example in support of what
Yes.
Anna, Esther, and Jonah are saying. 180 kilometers southwest of Harare, we have a model city being developed. It's 15 kilometers from where we've got a world-class platinum mining operation. But we've made sure, and it so happens I'm chairman of the platinum company, we made sure that we got the planning right. We got an environmental impact assessment survey done, and the city is being built in a designated government growth point where there is some cotton farming, which was the core business there. There's ecotourism. There's a whole host of activities going on there. And so we built it to support our 6,000 employees, and 6,000 employees plus 8 dependents. So now we have the financial services.
That's a sizable city.
Sector.
But here's
now,
my problem.
It's got
yes.
over 6. It's going to, within the next couple of years, it will have close to 100,000 people living.
But here's my problem. If your 15-year-old son, you come home one day and find your 15-year-old son smoking, you don't throw him out and create a new son.
No.
You have to work with what you have.
Of
You cannot
course.
Yeah.
go off and establish brand new cities every time you think the cities we currently have don't work for us.
This is why we propose. The city is a living organism.
Exactly.
The people live the city, huh? And the city is changing with the people. And I like the cities that they are livable and they are driven by the forces of the people, huh? Because those are the nicer cities. And this is why we advocate for planned city extensions. We don't advocate much new towns. And we advocate because otherwise there's the risk that the new town it has the streets well, but it has not the culture and the community and the problems and the fights and
a nice football team like Barcelona.
Yeah, where you can bring Messi. Huh? But I mean, you need to have the city is a living organism. Then there's a mixture here of the planners who need to put a skeleton of it, which is the matrix of the streets, and then don't plan too much, because life will draw the city, This kind of artificially designed, I don't like these maquettes of a city, because, and especially the maquette of a future city.
Yes.
I think that this is a petrification, this is a crystallization of the future of the life of the people.
And you don't know how people will live.
And we are not gods. Urban planners, we don't know how things will change. We don't know if in 10 years the economy will go in another direction. We don't know, Then the only thing that we should retain ourselves to do as urban planners is to do to produce the pattern of the public space, and then allow the people to mix and to create their own culture. This is why no city is equal to other.
Yeah.
Although we all share the same things, there are 500,000 cities in the world, and you don't see a repeated city.
Let's bring it then back. With this discussion about new cities and whether to use the life of the currently existing ones, the thing is, Anna, that young people would love the idea of a new city because it's a new beginning. They'll define the life that Jean-Claude is talking about. But these young people turn into old people. And so the young people of 30 years from now will demand their own new city. They'll demand their own satellite cities. How do you control for that?
Well, first of all, I think that ideas are created from things we see around us. And the thing is, we need to take into account and listen to the ideas that pop out of the heads of the young people living in these suburbs or these parts of the cities. I think what Klaus mentioned was very, very important. We have no idea look at technology, how it has changed during the last 10 years. With broadband and all transportation, everything. And the opportunities in this development in terms of creating economic opportunities and livelihoods, etc., etc. But all this has to come, it's a dynamic process, and I think we just we need to let it loose and listen to the ideas that come up from out there in the streets.
As we sort of come to an end then, and I'll probably begin with you, sort of your last statements, where does that then leave your urban planners, your city managers, even your business people, your young people in these towns and cities in the second, third decade of the 21st century? What sort of decision then should they be making? What plans should they be having?
Well, if I can make just one last statement, I think I want to come back to the participation bit, because it's young people need to be heard. We need to create those arenas where they can be heard, and maybe we shouldn't plan too much.
Are there always political arenas, though? And I knew it was last.
Well, politics is everything, isn't it? We can create political arenas, but I mentioned one example with the Kenyan youth who made their voices heard through an SMS platform. You know, the voices are out there, and it's our duty to listen to the voice. It's out there.
Mr. Mayor, where does that leave you?
My main message to the viewers and listeners is simply this. We need to depoliticize service delivery issues, because we need to make sure we cater for the divergent interests of the motley mix of people that gravitate towards cities, and just reduce everything to its basics.
Can they be contradictory, though, when you say that you have to incorporate everyone's voice? Sometimes they want things that are directly in combat with each other.
Yeah, but you need to listen, and listen attentively to what the needs of the various stakeholders are. But when you break these needs down to their basics, people want to wake up in the morning, turn on the tap, there's potable water. People want to drive over pothole-free roads. People want access to reasonable medical facilities, schools, and all those things. And all those service delivery areas are completely devoid of any ism. And the last message is the need for the people that live in urban areas to realize that they need to pay for the services. And those cities that are sitting on assets that can and should be leveraged to generate the much needed revenues to fund these service delivery programs, it's long overdue for them to wake up and smell the coffee and get on with it.
Esther, the whole issue of voice inclusion and all that.
Yeah, and I just want to say that there are things we do not have, they are must, and we know. Populations are increasing. The population is increasing, and people are moving to the cities, and that's a fact. And that we're also saying that cities are not homogeneous, and I think that's what everyone is saying here. That we'll have cities that were already developed, and they are cluttered by now. And we must have a strategy on improving how those cities can deliver to the people that are living there and expand it for the future generation. Because we're not going to close cities. I was in Detroit,
yes.
Detroit in the US. It's pathetic. And maybe that's why I agree with you. Right? You don't want a satellite city like Detroit where you have the cars factory and we have schools. And then I went there and nobody lives in those schools and nobody manufactures cars there. No one lives there. That's not what we are saying. But we are saying that in Nairobi City, adjacent to Nairobi City, let's make sure we have ability to provide what Nairobi City requires and be able to map out the kind of resources that are in the neighborhood. And that's why, for me, metropolitan city is very, very important. But we are also saying that even the youth are not homogeneous. I think in my lifetime of working in development work, I think more often than not, we have the face of a young man, a young boy, when we talk about youth. Very few do we have young women included, and the face of the young women be part of this development. Forget the fact that whenever we think of a young man, we see them as thugs, we see them as criminals. That's a mind we have. And
be careful, I'm a young man.
If they come from you probably don't come from a slum area or a poor background, But immediately we start thinking of a young person in the city,
context, yeah.
particularly from the neighborhood, we really have to change our attitude about the young people. They are not always that. For some of us who came from the village, when we were coming to the city, most of us looked at us as prostitutes because that's what we were known. The city is known for young girls. You either come to be a house help or a prostitute. That's what, and I think these are things that we have to deal with. We are not homogeneous. There are so many things. There are social, political, economic issues, but we must ensure that everybody, we are not homogeneous at all. Everybody, we must start new cities. The county government must start new cities, must develop the small towns and make sure that they have learned from the experience of the past, but we must be able to improve Nairobi, Kisumu, and Mombasa, because we are not going to move to the new cities. We will stay here.
Dr. John Close, you're the world's mayor.
No, I think that a city, as she's transpiring very clearly, is an emotional thing. You need to build a community. You need to build a place to live. It's not just a technical thing. Then I will just say 2 or 3 recommendations. First, reinforce the local government and choose a good mayor, a passionate mayor, man or woman, committed to the future of the city, and give some money to him, or the ability to collect money as the mayor of Harare. Because, if you need to provide water and all that, without money, you cannot do that. Then I think that the next step in Sub-Saharan Africa is to invigorate local governments. And I think in that sense, what is happening in Kenya is interesting. But it's not just politically. Should be the money on relation to that, or the capacity to tax. I don't know exactly. Every country has its own, but let's put a passionate person in front, committed person with the future of the city, able to listen and understand what is going on. And the technical recommendation is do a plan extension as near as possible to the center of the city and as big as possible in order to showcase the advantage of the planet city.
That is a good place to leave it at. But there's something that Esther just said, which is inclusion. Whenever I think of young people, I always think of just young men, but there's also young women and how to include them. And that's what will be our subject area for tomorrow. Still speaking about urban areas in the world, still speaking about cities, but that gender question. There's a lot of unique things that women have to face whenever they live in urban areas. Issues to do with security, issues to do with public transport. And those are the issues that we shall be looking at tomorrow on this Urban Talk series. So thank you very much for being with us this afternoon, going into evening. But tomorrow you're back with us at the exact same time, speaking more issues to do with cities, how we live in them, and how we do well in them. Thank you very much. My name is Wallace Kantai. Good evening.